So that's when it began. That would have been around 1974, 75, when I left LA, when I left Washington State and went to Santa Fe. So I did some mushroom sessions in Santa Fe, absolutely beautiful beyond belief, to walk in those arroyos with the flowering purple asters and the flowering gold sagebrush and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and the impeccable sky. And I started there, and then I carried that experimentation forward to 14 years of practice of shamanism in the mountains of Spain.
So how is it? Is it the connecting with the beauty that is so heightened, that is that shamanistic shift that happens within the psyche? What exactly is it, John?
Well, shamanism, unfortunately, is a word that begins with sham. And there's a lot of shaman in shamanism. But shamanism is basically an essential factor of human culture in those cultures which are animistic, and all indigenous and original cultures are animistic. That is to say that the people in those cultures realize that everything is alive. And however, they also realize something that was defined by anthropologists in the 19th century, which is called the boundary between the sacred and the profane, or the sacred and the mundane. So in all those indigenous cultures in the past, in Europe, the Native American cultures, everywhere you go, the depths of Russia, South America, the people realized that there were supernatural and divine presences living in nature. But in the setting of a human culture where people have to communicate with each other and transact things in order to have a culture, to have a community, a village or a city, you have to set a boundary, and you have to place certain aspects of the supernatural outside, beyond that boundary. Because were you to let them in their full force, society would not be able to function, you see. So Terence McKenna made this observation beautifully when he said that all indigenous societies that were healthy were animistic, and that they understood that the shaman is necessary in the society, the community, because the shaman is the individual, man or woman, who is given the permission to go beyond that boundary, to go into the raw domain of the supernatural, the Nahual, and then come back and bring the benefits of that to the community, you see? So shamanism is natural and innate factor. And again, in the beauty to come, there has to be a place in our societies where this is recognized and respected, and where there are genuine shamans who can do this, because encountering the raw power of the supernatural, I can tell you, is not for everyone. You need tremendous stamina to stand there, and you do stand. The Gnostics called themselves the standing race for a reason. It's not for everyone, but there have to be representatives who can cross that boundary into the sacred and come back into the mundane. Now, I understood these things in a certain way. I don't know, 30, maybe even 40 years ago. But it took a long time for me to find myself in that role and to know the responsibilities of that role. That is where I find myself today. So I consider all that I've learned and the privilege I hold to be a shaman today, to have come out of the experiences of the 60s, even though I did not find them in that generation and in that time and setting. And as we know, the scene was corrupted. So I probably couldn't have found it there. But eventually the forces that guide my life led me to it, you see. So I consider that I have fulfilled the mission and promise of my generation in that way. And I'm proud and happy with that outcome.
John, how are people able to tap into that? As you describe, you had your own experiences that brought you to where you are today. How do you work with people to help them gain these insights and into their own lives?
Well, that's not easy to do. Again, the circumstances of our time are extremely unfavorable.
No.
And I think it would be good for me to tell those who are listening that even I don't have the correct conditions to practice this Gaian shamanism in the way that I did for 14 years in Andalusia, in the Serranía de Ronda, which is a sorcerer's paradise up there. And how I miss the vultures, how I miss them. And they were always the guardians of my journeys. And when I got back to Gaucine, because I traveled around Europe, whenever I got back, I got in my car and I drove from Malaga Airport to Gaucine. I came down this mountain road and I turned on this dirt road. And that was the last stretch for me to go home. And almost every time that I turned on that dirt road to the home stretch, they would come over.
Oh, wow.
Vultures, the vultures of Andalusia, the shamanic guardians and allies. And so the circumstances of doing these, what I call telestic sessions, are not easy to satisfy. I don't have a satisfying answer to you if you want to do this. I regret that I don't. All I can say is that I have provided all of the guidelines for doing it in Planetary Tantra. And I've written extensively about my own telestic sessions, how to encounter the organic light, the protocols to handle with the plant allies. I've written a lot about that. I've provided a framework to the best of my ability for those who want to undertake some experimentation with these plant allies. But the place and the setting is tremendously important. And it needs to be in a place of wild nature, ideally, of savage beauty. And it's not easy to meet these conditions. So I know I myself feel a certain sense of dissatisfaction and maybe even inadequacy, that I can't just say, yeah, here, you want to go there, you want to do this, this is how you do it. But nevertheless, I've done the best I can to frame and guide people into that experience, should they wish to go there.
You know, John, I have friends who have truly done some very sacred work with the mushrooms, And it makes me really wonder, in my own experience with them as well, can we fully open to ourselves without these kinds of experiences? I mean, how far do we travel in our own journey, with or without these guides?
Well, there's an expression, I don't know, there's an expression from Mircea Eliade, who wrote the landmark book on shamanism. And it's interesting to know, if you read about Eliade, that first, when he wrote that book, I think it came out in English translation in the 50s. It was a landmark book. You know, when we were doing LSD and people were doing a lot of other substances, which I didn't do, in the 60s, there was almost no information about shamanism and shamanic traditions and practices in the past. Since then, there's been an enormous amount of literature. And he used the term archaic techniques of ecstasy. And there's also a term coming out of the 60s called technicians of the sacred. So to be a shaman is to be a technician of the sacred. And it's not for everyone. However, to answer your question, I don't want to leave people feeling disappointed. There's the question of, well, what about using these psychoactive plants, for instance, liberty caps or psilocybe mushrooms, cubensis mexicana, the golden truffles, which are really something. What about just using them privately and respectfully for my own self-growth, for my deepening of my sense of who I am and my deepening of my connection to nature? What about that, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I mean, well, and a little bit bigger than that is that how deeply are we, you know, everyone is unique, but how deeply can we connect and break open all those, you know, all that programming and all those doors that have kind of defined us and strapped us in like straitjackets over our lifetime? I mean, can we access ourselves? Can we become a fuller self through that process, and perhaps not without?
I'll be as careful as I can be. And I do want to respond to your question skillfully. Make 2 points. First one is, in my experience, the use of particularly the psychoactive mushrooms is not a therapeutic practice. They're not therapeutic. Ayahuasca is therapeutic. But the trouble with ayahuasca is that people take it too many times. You know, they take it over and over again. It's insane. If you take ayahuasca correctly, and I've taken it 4 times, then you only have to take it 4 times or even 2, because the great serpent power of the ayahuasca is a therapist and a healer. So she will not only reveal to you her great serpent power, the Mahakundala of the earth itself, of the Aeonic mother, Sophia, she will reveal herself to you, and she will go right to what it is that you need to be healed. And it's known as a fact that among the genuine ayahuasqueros of South America, it's not supposed to be a visionary plant that you go tripping on. It's for healing, and they're known to heal anything you can name.
Yeah.
You know, they can heal leukemia, cancer. They can heal schizophrenia. They don't heal anything. Sachamama heals it, the spirit of ayahuasca. So the mushrooms are different from her. They all have different functions. And the mushrooms, in my experience, are basically like emissaries. They take you to the court of the queen, you see? That's their basic role, and that's what they love to do. So they're not there for entertainment. They're not there to help you break through your conditioning, get over your complexes. No. And so I really can't say I don't approve of people using them for that. It's none of my business what people use them for. But I don't consider that to be the correct way to use them. So the correct way to use them is to accept that they are intermediaries who will take you to the organic light. And that's exactly what you do in a telestic session with the guidelines that I've described in many writings and talks. It's only one purpose, and that is to go directly to the naked, living luminosity of the earth and encounter it, you see? So, second point, and this is perhaps even more essential. And I want to state this correctly because I've never said this before, I don't think, publicly. You know, I have this strange claim, this strange pretense that I can converse with the intelligence of the planet, right? The Aeon Sophia. So whatever you think of that is fine with me. But I do have these conversations. And I've conversed with her about this subject that we're talking about right now. And my question was, well, hey, Mama, what you gonna do? What you gonna do about the people who, what is this expression you used? It's, I need to repeat your exact words. Something about to contact the depth of yourself. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Contact, you said it better, but you know, what you gonna do, Mama, with these people who want that and need that? And yet the circumstances for using psychedelics or psychoactive plants to do that are not easy, and they may not use them correctly. You know, who doesn't want to encounter the organic light once you've heard someone talk about it in the way that I have, which has been extravagant, right? And this is what I got. I'll give it to you straight. I'm translating, of course. Okay. Whether or not you have the sacred privilege to gain the grail and encounter the organic light, you can have the same effect of that experience in another way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The same effect. You can have it even if you never have that. You can have the same effect in another way. And what is the other way? The other way is quite simply to know what you are as apart from who you are. Now, who you are, you can find out by looking at your driver's license or your birth certificate, or ask a friend, ask your mother or your parents. They'll tell you who you are. But what you are, that's an entirely different matter. And what you are is an actor, a character in the living dream of the wisdom goddess. Now, if you can accept that and go into that concept and really find your place, know that you are, the effect of that is the same as if you experience the organic light. And that is such.
Yeah.
And many people are doing that. I can't tell you what a joy it is in Planetary Tantra and among the Shaktas. We laugh about it all the time. It's the biggest form of entertainment. We talk about the stars and the extras, you know. Don't want to be an extra. And an extra is someone on the set of a movie who doesn't even know what the plot of the movie is.
Yeah.
But when you're an actor in the movie, you're involved in writing the script, you know the producer, you know the director, then you are an actor living in her dream. And that is just as good as the ultimate telepathic experience.
Yeah. In our first interview, you were talking about how in the Gnostics world, there was the man and the woman and nature in that triangulation. And
right.
What comes to mind there is that very, you know, the connection to the earth, to nature, to Sophia, our integral understanding of being a part of that. And if that's how I would interpret what you're saying, that we connect with our intimate relationship there, that we are that.
That's what you are. It's not who you are. You see, it's not a self.
Right, it's what we are.
It's a role. It's a role. You're an actor playing a role, you see? But that role is the deepest and most profound realization of self that any human animal can have.
Mm-hmm.
See, you're not just a biological animal, you're also a fictional character.
Oh.
And when you know that role and you invent your own character and you write your own script in her dream, then you're on. That's what it means to be a Shakta. That's what it means to be a devotee of the wisdom goddess. And there's so much to learn about that. And there are people, hundreds of people around the world involved in what I'm telling you about now. To go to Nematta and join them, you know, join the acting crew. Don't be an extra.
That's quite profound, John. We have maybe about 15 minutes left. I wonder if you might maybe summarize some of the main aspects that we've covered today that would be most beneficial for people to take away from this conversation.
Sure. One point I would not want to omit in this talk goes back to what happened to the psychedelic revolution. There are many people who claim that that movement was a CIA psyop. Have you heard that theory?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. And there's a man called John Irvin, IRVIN. Now, he interviewed me years ago, I think when Not in His Image came out. And subsequently, John Irvin got on this bender. I think he became a Christian, but he got on this bender where he decided that he would present a case or an argument to prove that the entire psychedelic movement was completely planned and orchestrated by the CIA. Right? And he presents a lot of what he considers to be evidence of that, you know? The fact that Wasson, who broke the story in Life magazine about participating in a mushroom ceremony with Maria Sabinas in Mexico, broke the story in a mainstream magazine that Wasson was actually an asset. Well, it is a fact that there was a CIA agent there with Wasson on one of his trips or two. And it is also a fact that well-known CIA front, I think it's called the Geschichter Foundation, had provided money for Wasson's trip to Mexico. Not that he needed it, because he was ultra rich, connected with Morgan Bank. So all of that leads Jan Irvin and others to think, that it was all corrupt from the beginning, that there was nothing genuine in it, that it was not another ground force eruption, like I am claiming that the sexual revolution was. Also, Timothy Leary, who crossed my path in a way in my life, was said to have been a CIA asset. So the story goes that when he was at West Point as a cadet, and he was thrown out of West Point for being a bad boy, that was all a front, and that actually he was always working for the CIA. And I'll tell you something that's real insider. When I talked to Joanna Harcourt Smith, who was closely linked to Leary and was a friend of mine for, 20 years or so, one of the last times I talked to her was when Jan Irvin was pushing this whole thing, which in my mind had behind it the intention to totally trash my generation and me. I mean, I took it a bit personally. Oh, it was not genuine. You were just a dupe. They set the whole thing up, right? So I asked Joanna Harcourt Smith, point blank. I said to her, we have talked for hours and days and months about your experience with Timothy Leary. I helped you write a book about it and get that story out. And I said, did you ever, at any time in your years with Leary, receive any information that would indicate to you that he had been recruited by the CIA when he was at West Point, and that he was in fact working as a CIA asset? And she didn't answer that question. Yes or no? And I thought that was quite revealing. So let's just say, yeah, let's just say Jan Irvin is right. So what? So what? It doesn't mean that the millions of people who took LSD and the millions of people who opted for cognitive liberty were just dupes being manipulated by a three-letter agency. That's ridiculous. They did it because they wanted to, because they needed to. And some of them learned and grew from it. And it nourished their lives with a taste of enlightenment. You see? So well, I do not buy the idea that the whole generation was a corrupt setup from the beginning. I don't.
And couldn't we extrapolate that to exactly what's taking place today? That was a time of a tremendous explosion and enlightenment. And today is a time of tremendous explosion and enlightenment, where people are attempting to manipulate, and yet we take what we have that's an integral part of whom we are, life, love, our connection, our part of being nature, and we are exploding it into the most tremendous opportunity for us for our own growth.
I couldn't agree more. As horrible as this crime is, the Soviet regime, the Great Reset, the whole PSYOP, there's never been an opportunity in all of human history like this. And it's the end game.
And John, what is the opportunity? I mean, I know I call this a spiritual revolution, a war against spirituality. This is definitely a war against, life and love. And what do we do? Where do we go? What do we do with it?
We go to the finish line. And every one of us goes there in his or her particular way, but we can go there as unity. We can go there in unity. As long as we recognize each other, we share the same knowledge. We know that it's a hoax. And the way I see it, I talk about the 3 R's, 3 R's. I'm not talking about R, pirate coin, but it's funny that there are 3 R's in R. The 3 R's, right? 3 R's. Let's see if I can remember them. These are the goals to be attained in the beauty to come, the goals to be attained by opposing and overthrowing this horrific crime against humanity. Bear in mind that we have a great opportunity. It's not like 9/11. You found out that it was a crime after it happened. You're finding out about a crime in progress.
Now,
See?
yes.
Now. So the first R is restoration. That means restoring life back to the norms of before, but even better, because having had the shock of all of our liberties and common pleasures taken away from us, we will respect and preserve them even better in the future when we restore them. So that's the first R, restoration. Second R is reparation. That means that all the money that is being swindled, because this is an enormous financial swindle.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that has been illegally acquired by various nefarious agencies. All the money of the millionaires, the billionaires, the NGOs, the philanthropic organizations, the foundations, all their money and all their resources is taken away from them as reparation and used to build
Wow.
the next world, the next society,
Wow.
you see? And then there is revenge. So revenge means no mercy, no forgiveness. And anyone who has been accomplice in this crime, from the highest executive level down to the bottom, has no place in the beauty to come. If they continue to live, they will be pariahs. And this is also part of the responsibility to really be brutally ruthless in the outcome. I don't believe that all the good and decent people who are fighting against this can ultimately succeed unless we are brutally ruthless toward the perpetrators. And remember that people who have power never concede it willingly. It has to be taken from them.
Yeah. It takes great courage on every single level, and the courage to stand for our honor and our beauty and life, to be brutal. I mean, it's a very,
That's right.
it's a very profound awareness. Yeah.
Well, she is brutal. She's brutal.
Yeah.
The Earth Mother is brutal. You better believe it.
Yeah.
And Kali is brutal.
Yeah.
If you experience that particular frequency of Kali, it's like the most exquisite tenderness that you could imagine, but there is a brutality inside of it. And that is the brutality that brings us back to the ultimate sanity. And beauty is everything. Beauty and pleasure are everything to our Divine Mother. And when they become everything to us as well, then we're in the next world. Some are there already.
And it is our responsibility to protect them. And if we don't step into that, then, you know, how can we really deserve to flourish in that?
Exactly. Well, that's where the hate word comes in. I wouldn't finish an interview without mentioning the hate word, to give anyone a reason to discard me if they didn't have one already. but unless you can hate, you can't protect what you love. Period.
You know, that's stuck in my craw from our last interview, and I
I
certainly,
had a feeling that might have been.
it has,
Yeah.
but it's been an integral part of my experiences prior and since then. And so it's given me tremendous thought on that. And I appreciate that, because we embody all of these emotions, and without stepping into that awareness of all of it must be a part of this entire experience. We can't just pick or choose. It's a little bit like the Bean story about the village. We can't just have the playful characters that we want in that village. We have to have every single personality that is capable of holding it all together at the times when the droughts come, or the hailstorms, or whatever the dearths are, or the excesses, and we need to call upon all of that within ourselves and within nature. And it's not a pick
Yeah,
and choose.
hate is integral to a sane human person. I mean, come on, you know. And hate is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is indifference.
Yes.
And
The-
indifference or
the
dispassion
psychopaths.
is also very important. To be indifferent to a lot of things is essential. But I think that it's no big metaphysical revelation, Kathleen. Who doesn't hate a liar? Who doesn't hate being lied to? Who doesn't hate being deceived? You see? So that natural and innate reaction is called forth by this great challenge we face today. And it's gets worse at the same time that it gets better. Perhaps that's the last thing I could say, because we ain't out of the woods yet here, honey. But we're getting there.
Well, we are.
Yeah.
It's the awareness of what is, that allows us to dig more deeply and bring forward more courage to look at it with greater focus. And what else can we ask for at this point, than to be curious enough to see what it is that holds us so strongly to love and beauty and life. If we're not willing to stand on that edge of that precipice, if we're not willing to fight for all of this, then what is there?
Yeah, come on. Look at it. It's a great adventure. We're in a sci-fi nightmare, just like the Gnostics predicted. Aliens have invaded, but they're in our midst. They're within the gates. They're not coming from outer space. They're already here.
Yeah.
And it's a great adventure. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Find your role in it. I think it's a good note to close on. It's been extraordinary for me to talk in this way about myself and my generation. I've never done this before. Occasionally in some conversations with friends, but I consider those who are listening to be friends. And I want to say it's been really an unusual experience for me to take up this subject, and I thank you for the opportunity to do so, Kathleen.
Well, thank you very much, John Lamb Lash. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.